My name is Tyler Nix. Jazz can be dated back to the 1910s. Its origins were centered around blues and ragtime. However, as it goes through time, it has been adapted by various genres, thus creating things like bossa nova, big band, fusion, bebop, hard bop, and so on. In the 1910s, jazz first made its debut in New Orleans. Through the 20s, some considered jazz to be just noise and others saw it as a different style. In 1924, George Gershwin put out the famous piece Rhapsody in Blue. Big band jazz was the main form until post-war. After the war, musicians then split from the idea of big bands and went into two main directions. One being the rise of solo singers making popular music, like Frank Sinatra and Ella Fitzgerald. The other was musicians like Thelonious Monk, Charlie Parker, and Dizzy Gillespie making what is now known as bebop. This type of jazz was more challenging because of its use of substitute chords, chromaticism, dissonance, and improv. Through the 50s, the genre got split into even more sections, such as people making bossa nova music, hard bop, and free jazz. After this, jazz entered a more modern era with fusion music, and the other genres expanding their vocabulary. What can be heard today is all over the place. Everything from big bands, traditional standards, and people experimenting with microtonal jazz can be heard across the country. Alright, so I'm going to teach you how to go through a jazz standard, which is going to be Autumn Leaves, and you can see it right here. So the first step to going through a standard is just learning the melody as it's written, which would be. The next step would be go through the chords, and you can see that it's just a sequence that accompanies that melody. It's a lot like classical music in that sense. After this, you would use improv to embellish the melody and or the chords. The way you go through the melody is by adding notes in between or just changing the rhythm. And the way you do it with chords is by adding tensions. So it would sound like this. The next step to it, after you get done a chart, is to actually start soloing over what the chords are. And the way this is done is by finding notes that are close from one chord to the other and adding notes in between them to make it sound like they're passing to each other. It's a lot like connecting the dots. So I'm going to solo over the A section and show you how it actually sounds and how it gives it a jazzy feel. And that's how you actually complete a jazz piece.